Hello everybody, hope you all are fit and fine. Dear friends, before we proceed to discuss our topic, let me remind you the message delivered by our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Modi ji. Stay home, stay safe in order to protect our valuable lives and fight against coronavirus disease 19 outbreak. During this lockdown period, we all should strictly follow the guidelines suggested by Government of India to resist this crucial time. We need to continue with our coordinated and collective efforts to fight COVID-19 and also make productive use of our time during this prevailing situation by adopting ICT for teaching learning process. And as a part of this academic initiative, I am here to deliver a lecture on Aristotle's Poetics. We will primarily concentrate on theory and concept of tragedy. Friends, as you all know that this topic has been prescribed in BA program, semester 3 and semester 4, as well as it has also been prescribed in master degree, MA semester 1 and semester 3. So, we'll start the topic. Aristotle's theory and concept of tragedy. Before we proceed to consider Aristotle's conception of tragedy, a word of caution is necessary. It must be constantly borne in mind that the Greek conception of tragedy was different from the modern conception. Today, we regard tragedy as a story with an unhappy ending. But this was not Greek conception. In the Greek language, the word tragedy means a great song. And the word came to be used for plays because of the practice of awarding gods to winners in a dramatic contest. On the days of the dramatic festivals, 4 plays were performed on each of the days, 3 generally serious in tone and 1 that is satyr play or burlesque. For the Greek, tragedy simply meant one of the 3 serious plays presented before the satyr play at a dramatic festival. Greek tragedies were serious in tone, but many of them had happy ending. The Greek conception of tragedy should be kept in mind, for Aristotle did not consider tragedy from the modern point of view. So let me begin with the topic, the origin of tragedy and how it has superiority over the epic. Aristotle proceeds to trace the origin and the development of poetry. In the beginning, poetry was of two kinds. There are iams or invectives on the one hand, and hymns on the gods or panegyrics on the great on the other. The first iams or invective developed into satiric poetry, and the hymns into epic or heroic poetry. Out of heroic poetry developed tragedy, and out of satiric came the comedy. In chapter number 26 of the Poetics, the Greek philosopher compares tragedy with epic in a number of respects and demonstrates this superiority. Both epic and tragedy imitate serious subject in a grand kind of verse, but they differ in as much as epic initiates only in one kind of verse and tragedy uses different kinds of verse for its choral, odes and its dialogue. The epic is more lengthy and so more comprehensive and varied, but the tragedy has much greater concentration and so is more effective. Beside this, the tragedy has all the elements which the epic has, while there are certain elements of tragedy which the epic has, while there are certain elements of tragedy which the epic does not have. The epic lacks music and spectacle. The epic is more lengthy and so more comprehensive and varied, but the tragedy has much greater concentration and so is more effective. Beside this, the tragedy has all the elements which the epic has, while there are certain elements of tragedy which the epic does not have. The epic lacks music and spectacle, which are important constituents of tragedy and which enhance its effect. It has also reality of presentation as well as unity of action, both of which the epic lacks. Hence, it should be noted here that the tragedy is superior because all the parts of an epic are included in tragedy, but those of tragedy are not all of them to be found in the epic. Now, let me define tragedy according to Aristotle. Tragedy then is an imitation of an action that is serious, complete and of a certain magnitude, in language embellished with each kind of artistic ornament, in several kinds being found in separate parts of the play, in the form of action, not of narrative, with incidents arising pity and fear, wherewith to accomplish its catharsis of such emotions. Every tragedy, therefore, as per the definition, must have 6 parts, which determine its quality. These parts are plot, character, diction, thought, spectacle, and melody. This definition has wide implications, and it falls naturally into 2 parts. The first part, from the imitation of an from the imitation of an action, and not narration. It is concerned with tragedy, with one of the imitative arts, and points out medium, object, and imitation. The second part is concerned with the function of tragedy. So, looking to the terms applied here, now we'll focus on objects, manners, and medium of imitation. First definition distinguishes tragedy from other forms of poetry. Its object of imitations are serious actions, and hence it is different from comedy, which imitates the non-serious. Secondly, tragedy, on the basis of its manner of imitation, is distinguished from the epic, which narrates and does not represent through action. And thirdly, on the basis of its medium, it is distinguished from the lyric. It employs several kinds of embellishment in different parts, that is, verse in dialogue and song in the choric parts. Now, the action or plot, its completeness, what Aristotle has defined regarding the plot of tragedy. He examines the plot of tragedy, and tragedy imitates action, and its plot consists of a logical and inevitable sequence of events. The action it imitates is its plot, and the action must be complete. That is, it must have beginning, a middle, and an end. The beginning is that from which further action flows out, and which is intelligible in itself, and not consequent or dependent on any previous situation. A satisfying end is that which follows inevitably from what has gone before, but which does not lead to further action. It marks the completion of the tragic action. And the middle is that which follows inevitable upon what has gone before, and also leads on to an inevitable conclusion. At all points, Aristotle emphasizes that the tragic action must be in accordance with the laws of probability and necessity. Regarding the size or length, we use the term magnitude, or say the term magnitude has been included. The action of a tragedy must be of a certain magnitude, and the word has been used in the sense of size or length. It must be long enough to permit an ordinary development of action to a catastrophe. Too short an action cannot be regarded as proper and beautiful. For its different parts will not be clearly visible, as in the case of a very small living creature. Neither should it be too long, for in that case it will not be taken in as an artistic whole by the memory. The action should be proportionate in the relation of the different parts to each other and to the whole. Hence, we can say that it must be an organic whole. Regarding the plots, Aristotle divides the plot of tragedy into two kinds: simple and complex. He calls a plot simple when the change in the fortunes of the hero takes place without peripety and discovery. And the plot is complex when it involves one or the other or both. The peripety, that is sudden and unexpected change. The peripety is the change in the fortunes of the hero, and the discovery is a change from, say, ignorance to knowledge. Aristotle prefers a complex plot, for it startles and captures attention, and so is likely to perform the tragic function more effectively than a simple plot. He regards the episodic plot, that is, a plot in which the different episodes introduced by the dramatist have neither probability nor necessity as the rest of all. Now, what is probability and necessity? Throughout the Poetics, Aristotle lays great emphasis on the probability and necessity of the action of a tragedy. There must be a causal connection between the various events and incidents, and they must follow each other naturally and inevitably. No incident or character should be superfluous. The events introduced must be such as are probable under the circumstances. Similarly, Aristotle emphasizes unity of action. He is against the plurality of action because it weakens the final effect of a tragedy. Embellishment. By the various embellishments in various parts, Aristotle means verse and song. Tragedy imitates through verse in the dialogue and through song in the choric parts. Verse and song beautify and decorate and offer pleasure. But Aristotle does not regard them as essential or indispensable for the success of a tragedy. Now, what according to Aristotle is the function of tragedy? The answer is catharsis. He points out that it is to present scenes of fear and pity, and thus to bring about a catharsis of these emotions. But Aristotle does not supply any explanation of the function of tragedy. Hence, critics have advanced a number of explanations, and the term has been variously interpreted. What Aristotle exactly meant by the term can only be understood with a reference to his other works, more specifically the rhetoric, the politics, and the ethics. The whole question is a complex one, and a number of interpretations are possible. But for our purposes, it would suffice to say that by the catharsis of such emotions as pity and fear, he means their restoration to the right proportions, to the desirable mean, to the desirable mean, to the golden mean, which is the basis of his discussion of human qualities in the ethics. Having examined the definition, nature and function of tragedy, Aristotle comes to a consideration of its formative or say constituent parts. He enumerates 6 formative elements of a tragedy: plot, character, diction, thought, spectacle, and song. 2 of these parts relate to the medium of imitation, and 1 to the manner of imitation, and the 3 to the object of imitation. The remaining 3 to the objects of imitation. Song or the lyrical element is to be found in the choric parts of a tragedy. It is the embellishment spoken of earlier which distinguishes the tragedy from the epic. It is one of the sources of the pleasure of tragedy. The spectacle or the scenic effects have more to do with stagecraft than with the writing of poetry. And hence Aristotle is of the view that the dramatist must depend for its effects on his own powers rather than on spectacles. He writes, fear and pity can be produced by the spectacular means, but it is much better to produce them by the way you write your play. This is one of those platitudes of Aristotle which human nature has always ignored, and the wisdom of which it has to learn again and again through experience. There can be no worse enemy of the art of the dramatist than the theatre manager, and the reliance on the theatrical and sensational has spoiled many an excellent play. Thought is the power of saying whatever can be said or what is the appropriate to the occasion. Thought is required when a statement is made or some statement is proved or disapproved. Thought is the intellectual element in a tragedy and it is expressed through the speech of a character. This implies that only such speeches are significant that express the views and feelings of a character. This in itself brings out the importance of language or diction in tragedy. It is the language which gives us the thought and feelings of the various dramatists' personae. And it is through speech that their character is first revealed. That is why the language of tragedy must be unusually expressive. Aristotle discusses the question at length in all its aspects and is the first writer to emphasize the expressive value of metaphorical language. He considers the gift. Aristotle considers the gift of metaphor as the greatest of all. Metaphor is the source of the beauty and vividness of language. As a general rule, the language of tragedy must be clear and it must not be mean. The language must be clear but also dignified and elevated. In the interest of clarity, it must use familiar and current words, but rare and unfamiliar words must be introduced judiciously to impart elevation. As regards characterization in general, Aristotle lays down 4 essential qualities. First, the characters must be good. Secondly, they must be appropriate. Thirdly, they must have likeness. And fourthly, they must have consistency. The characters should be good, but not too good or perfect. Wicked characters may be introduced if required by the plot. Aristotle is only against the wanton introduction of evil and wickedness. By appropriateness of character, Aristotle means that they must be true to type. That is, they must have the characteristics which are common to the profession, rank or class. By likeness, Aristotle may mean either of two things. First, the character must be lifelike and they must be true representatives of actual human nature. Or, secondly, they must be like the traditional or historical personages on whom they are modeled and whose names they bear. Aristotle's views are based on the practice of Greek dramatists, and these dramatists use only traditional plots and traditional characters. Hence, in a tragedy dealing with the life of King Oedipus, the character of Oedipus must have likeness to the traditional conception of his character. The characters must show a consistent development. If there is an inconsistent character, it must be represented as inconsistent throughout. There must be no sudden and unaccountable changes in character in whatever the character says or does. The demands of necessity and probability must be satisfied. Now coming to the consideration of the ideal tragic hero, Aristotle lays down that he should neither be perfectly good nor utterly bad. He should be a man neither of a blameless character nor a depraved villain. He is a man of ordinary weaknesses and virtues like ourselves, leaning more to the side of good than of evil, occupying a position of eminence and falling into ruin from that eminence, not because of any deliberate wickedness, but because of some error of judgment on his part. It should be noted here that he should be a man such as is likely to help the tragedy in performing its proper function, that is, of bringing about a catharsis of the emotions of pity and fear. Obviously, we feel pity and fear at the spectacle of a man like us, suffering not because of some deliberate villainy, but because of some error of judgment. While all the 6 elements discussed here are essential to tragedy, the most important constituent of tragedy, according to Aristotle, is plot. The plot he considered a very soul of tragedy, and by plot he means the arrangement of incidents, and incident means action. Tragedy is an imitation of actions, both external and internal. Hence, to conclude this lecture, I would say that Aristotle's Poetics is not only the major philosophical discussion of literature, but the foundation of all later discussions. Dear friends, in addition to this video lecture, a PPT on this topic has also been uploaded on our college app, and I hope both this lecture and PPT would prove very helpful in your study. Thank you very much.